Hey everyone, this is Gary Kay, and I want to welcome you to this is going to be one of my favorite launch and learns. This is how to esports, and I'm excited about it because I've been a big fan of esports for, I guess, probably 10, 12 years. And where I really got intimately involved in esports was I teach at the University of North Carolina, and Epic Games is right down the road from us. And before the pandemic, they came to us and asked my class, which we do every semester, we do projects for clients. And they came to my class and said, hey, we have an idea. We want to do a Fortnite intercollegiate sports tournament, and we'd love for you to come up with the plan for how we would actually do that. And basically, how would that actually run? So we came up with the concept for it, and then also how the thing would be marketed and how they would roll it out. And then of course the pandemic hit, so everything kind of like got thrown up in up in a tizzy at that point in time. But it was a lot of fun to work with them, and it was a lot of fun to envision esports, and I'd learned a lot about it. For example, at that time, I learned that one of the things that Epic Games was trying to do was specifically get more women involved in esports, because Fortnite was sort of this one game that had broken the mold. It was played by a lot of women, and historically, a lot of gaming games have been dominated by teenage boys and 20 something boys. So this one was sort of like a barrier breaker, and it could be played on any platform, which was quite unusual at the time. You didn't have to have just an Xbox or just a PlayStation. You could play it on multiple platforms, including an iPhone even. So I got really interested in that. And during the pandemic, a lot happened in esports behind the scenes that made the market actually explode coming out of the pandemic. So I'm excited to do this session with you today. What's awesome too is that our sponsor of this session can do every part of esports except the displays, but they can send the signal up to the displays and make sure that you do the best you possibly can in esports. And that's Extron, of course. We're going to talk about sort of like how our esports systems built, because it could be a combination of AV over IP, could be all AV over IP, and there's a lot of complexity, but there's also a huge reward if you're in esports. So thank you for joining us on the Launch platform. For those of you watching me on LinkedIn, then you can ignore this 1-minute instructions. But if you're on the Launch platform, that means that you're a member of the platform, and there's a lot of interaction that we give you here. For example, to my right is the Q&A. So if you pose a question in there, I will actually answer that question and pose it to our panelists, which I'll introduce in just a bit. Below my video window here, you'll see polling. And in the polling section, that's what we're going to ask you. We're going to ask you about, I don't know, I think over the course of 2 days, this is a 2-day session, we're going to maybe ask you 10 questions. We want you to participate in the polls. We're going to give prizes to random participants in the polls, but it's also going to help us understand what you understand about esports and also your interest level in esports. Below that, or you can network with all the people that are on here live. And that's basically, it's not that complicated. And of course, we're going to archive all of this on the page that you're on now. So if you want to watch this again, you want to forward it to your friends or colleagues, you can do that just by coming back to this page, and you have access to that for the rest of existence. Just come to launch.com, LAVNCH.com, and do whatever you want to do with it. So look, I want to thank you for joining me today. I'm going to pop up some slides here, and I'm going to walk you through some data and some interest points. I'm going to try to at least get you interested in esports and why you should be part of this growing, amazing market opportunity of esports. And what's interesting is if you currently have a relationship with any university or college, technical school, where students are coming to campus taking classes, I'm going to make a bet with you. I'm going to bet if you talk to the AV department at that school, someone is talking about an esports venue somewhere. Whether it's the athletic department talking about adding esports, and I'll tell you why in just a minute, or if it's a club that might exist already and they'd like to have an esports venue, or maybe even build an arena, or it's a professor that's in the business department where they're talking about esports as gamification of marketing. Someone is talking about esports. There's not a university, just like universities all want digital signage right now, they all want esports too. And there's some drivers there. I'm going to tell you what some of the drivers are. I'm excited that you're joining me. It means you're obviously interested in esports. I do want to tell you that what's cool about this is you can get one CTS RU for attending this. As long as you're attending it live, it'll automatic. We know who you are. Obviously, you registered, you logged in. We're going to go ahead and send you your certificates for this. And I want to thank you for doing that. And thanks to Avixa for seeing the quality in this. All right. First off, let me give you some data that I think you'll find quite interesting. One of the reasons, the expectation is that esports market, and this we're talking about gaming in general, is the overall market. Esports is the market we're going to focus on over the course of today and in a couple of days for part 2 of this. But I'll talk about both, and I'll talk about them somewhat interchangeably, then I'll break them out separately. 46% is the growth of the esports market for 24 over 23. All right, so if you look at the 2024 business for esports is going to be 46% larger than 2023. The main reason for that is just the sheer growth in colleges. It's not as much K through 12, but in university, higher education, colleges, and athletic departments, which will make sense to you as we go through this. A lot of venues had been planned pre-pandemic. The funding came through, and even though they wanted to build it in 23, it came to fruition in 2024, and the space became available in 2024 once we figured out who was coming back and who wasn't coming back. 2024 will be the total market for 2024 will be somewhere around 2.7, 2.8, maybe $2.9 billion in esports. That's the global size of the market. If you look at total players of esports games, now not just esports venue stuff, meaning the games that they're actually playing. And right now there's 6 or 7 game platforms that dominate the esports tournament market. We're talking about 335 million worldwide players and viewers. So we're talking about the people that actually play the games, whether they're casual players or serious players, and the people who are viewing it. And you can view it on places like YouTube and Twitch. And YouTube is obviously a Google product. Twitch is obviously, I think it's Amazon owned product now. So I remember I told you I was going to use those terms a little bit interchangeable. I want to make sure you have the facts here. The total gaming market, just to put that into perspective, that means those of you who are playing games on your mobile phone devices, but also people playing games on set-top box devices and computers, will be in 2024 around $187 billion globally. Now, I'm going to put that in perspective, and I'm going to ask Emily to take me off the screen sharing real quick with my slides, because I want to look straight in your eyes as I tell you this. Because this is a substantial statistic, 187 billion globally in e-gaming. And what I mean by e-gaming is not board games. I'm talking about electronic gaming, the things that you have to use your thumbs or your fingers or something in your eyes to actually get these things to play. And some of you may be playing games on Facebook, and some of you may be playing games. I see probably anywhere from 10 to 30% of the people I sit next to on airplanes. I don't know if they just don't want to talk to me, but the first thing they do is grab their phone and start playing games on their phones. So you know that what I'm talking about, that segment of the market all the way through esports. That is twice the size of the Hollywood movie market, and it's actually almost 2.5 times the size. So let's take a look at the amount of money that Hollywood made in 2023 for first release movies. So they made the movies in Hollywood, right? And then they released them in the theater. And then they put them on, television later, or they released them in, HBO Max, or Max, I guess it's called now, or where they release them, Apple TV, those kinds of places. That total market, including concessions, let's count the concessions that are sold at movie theaters, will be about $93 billion. So you're talking about $93 billion versus $187 billion. What is interesting there is everyone knows about going to movies. And in fact, every Monday morning you get up and listen to any given radio station, they're going to say, here's the number 1, number 2, number 3 movie of the weekend. That market is smaller than the e-gaming market, but they don't tell you the number 1, number 2, number 3 game played over the weekend. So the market is already big. Let me give you another data point, because Hollywood spends a lot of money. I went to a movie last night. I actually went and saw Beetlejuice, not allowed to say it 3 times, as you know. I saw the second Beetlejuice. I was blown away. I have to say, I loved that I could just see the games flowing from that, coming from that movie. But the creative was through the roof. It was very creatively done. And I got popcorn, I got Coke. I'm including all of that in this market. So you think about that market and how popular going to movies are. But it takes a lot of money to make a movie. They have to pay Michael Keaton. They have to pay all the other actors and actresses that are in the movie. They have to pay the production team. They have to pay the distribution rights, everything. When Epic Games releases Fortnite and you buy a new skin for your character, and let's say you pay $10 for that skin, Epic, and I'm sure they probably this, but I'm probably don't want me saying this. But let's say you pay $10 for that skin. They're making $9.90 off that skin. There's no way they're cost them more than 10 cents. So the margin is much higher. And in fact, what's interesting is Titanic was the #1 movie for like a decade and a half. Like it had usurped every other movie for a decade and a half. It was the multi-billion-dollar movie it was. And Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, when it was released, beat Titanic sales in 3 weeks. So Titanic led the Hollywood movie market for a decade and a half, and that one video game sold more in 3 weeks than that movie had sold in a decade and a half. So that's how big. We're going to reshare the slides now. That's how big the e-gaming market is, and I want to put that in perspective because look. If you ever go to an esports tournament, you're going to be like, wow, this is amazing because it's filled with AV, and you're going to love being part of esports because it is filled with everything that you have been trying to explain to your neighbors that you do every single day, right? I mean, so if you bring a neighbor to an esports tournament, they're going to totally understand what it is you do. All right. So let's break out esports from e-gaming because the electronic gaming market is huge. Like you have Sony with the PlayStation 5, and you have Xbox from Microsoft, and you have all the individual video game companies that are out there. I mentioned Epic Games, Blizzard, Activision, which is now part of, I think they're part of Microsoft. I mean, there's this continuous merging and consolidation of the market going on. So what I want to focus on now is specifically esports, and I want to talk about sort of like how esports fits into our segment of the market and why we should care about esports. And the truth of the matter is those two markets are kind of merging in the sense that as the popular games that are electronic games get played by more people, we tend to have a tournament for them. Now, I mentioned to you that during the pandemic, it was actually a big time for esports. And a lot of people don't really talk about this, and it's not really well documented. But one of the most interesting things that happened was, as you know, I mean, there's lots of commercials, lots of movies made about this. If you were a big sports fan in 2020, there wasn't much to watch. I mean, most of the teams dumped their seasons, and most of the teams didn't do anything except NASCAR. NASCAR flipped from being a get in your car and drive outside and make a whole bunch of left turns market, which is huge, right? NASCAR, by the way, if you've never been to NASCAR, you should go because, a football, typical football game, college football game you go to has 50, 60, 70,000 fans. There's not a NASCAR race that they don't hold without 150,000 fans. It doesn't matter where it's located. But NASCAR was more than ready for the pandemic. They certainly hadn't planned this, but all of their drivers have at-home simulators that simulate the driving experience with the car so well that they had been doing NASCAR online tournaments with each other one-on-one already. And the NASCAR Association actually had been encouraging these. So they, within 3 months of the pandemic starting, flipped into actually having NASCAR drivers themselves actually drive their simulators and actually having races where they simulated the actual races outside. And people would tune in to Fox Sports on the weekends and watch the simulated drivers driving the simulated cars as if they were driving on the racetrack. And it was not as popular as far as viewership, but close to somewhere in the range of 60 to 80% of the viewership per race, depending on which race they did, of what they would normally get for television viewership. And it was the only sport on. By the way, there was no other sports. They had no competition, so it actually helped them. And this is another story. This is another thing. A kid from not Virginia Tech, but a kid from a Liberty University in Virginia actually got a NASCAR driving contract because he beat the NASCAR drivers in one of these NASCAR 2020 races that they did. So that's how well they felt like it simulated the real world. So you see how this is sort of like trickling up. So what ended up happening was during the pandemic, people realized that these game platforms were as good or close to as good as real life. And of course, Formula One has done the same thing. They had the E-Race series, and now they've continued the E-Race series during the Formula One seasons as well. And of course, we've had, a higher level of virtual gaming where you can actually put on headsets and walk through environments. It's a little dangerous in your house if you don't know where you're at any moment in time. I think Apple has sort of helped that, and there's a great potential in a product like what Apple has provided, where you have the ability to see through the headset at the same time. Of course, Facebook just last week introduced glasses like that, and we'll see where that ultimately takes us. But the growth has been since 2022. The growth has continued at above 25%, and it's, as I mentioned, it's already larger than the movie theater market plus concessions combined. Now, here's the reason why colleges are jumping on the esports bandwagon. Number one is the NCAA has made it a sport. It's actually a Division I sport at a number of colleges, and major colleges, over 120 universities now actually have college sports teams. Some are club, like here at UNC, our team is a club team, but some are actually varsity teams, like UC Irvine is an example, who's won a few different national championships. The Naval Academy, Army, West Point. There's I'm going to show you in a little while. There's a local community college here, not too far from where I am, 10 miles away, that actually has an esports team as well. So what ends up happening is you now have a new sport sort of emerging on college campuses, and for the most part being funded by the gaming companies. So the gaming companies themselves are actually pumping money into the esports market by actually funding the tournaments that are happening in colleges. And that's what's actually driving adoption on college and university campuses. And the public's looking for a new sport. And the Olympics saw breakdancing as the new sport and didn't turn out to be as popular as they thought it was going to be. So they decided, the International Olympic Committee decided to drop breakdancing from the 2028 Olympics. And guess what sport they're going to add? Guess what sport they're going to add? I can guarantee you my guests know which sport they're going to add. So let me introduce both my guests today, and I'm excited to have both of them on here, Kevin Diltz and Andrew Evans from Extron. Kevin, firstly, if you don't mind introducing yourself and tell them a little bit about why you might be here.
Hey, Gary. Well, thanks for having us today. I'm excited to be part of the conversation. I joined the team here at Extron a little over a year ago as the Esports Business Development Manager. I have quite a bit of experience in Pro AV. I worked for another manufacturer for 10 or so years till COVID hit. That caused some layoffs, unfortunately. So at that point in time, I transitioned into the esports industry. And the reason why I did that was at my previous role, I called on colleges and universities, and I got to see kind of the birth and the rise of collegiate esports since the early days, 2014, 2015. And I was really fascinated by, just the opportunity that it gave students to participate in an activity that many of these students just didn't find that home on a college campus before, and seeing it grow over time and rise. And I've always been a gamer, my whole life since the old Atari days. I thought this was really something that I was interested in being part of. I found a pretty unique niche in scholastic esports, so K through 12, working for two of the national competitive leagues for high schools. One of those is High School Esports League, and the other is Play Versus. And I can share some numbers about just how large the K through 12 esports segment is, but it's just,
I'm going to actually have you share those in just a bit.
Great.
But I think your introduction was awesome, and I think it makes sense as to why you're here, and the fact that the education market, and that it's interesting because it seems to be that's the bubble, right? the bubble is starting in higher education and then rapidly moving to K through 12. You mentioned a really interesting point that I want to come back to in just a second, and that
Sure.
is esports gave kids that didn't have another thing on the campus to kind of gravitate towards. So, for example, they weren't necessarily the athletes, or they weren't necessarily on the chess club or in the popular clubs, but yet they were going home playing games every day. And so I want to come back to that in just a second. But first, I want to introduce Andrew Evans, who I've known for many years from Extron. Andrew, tell them what you do at Extron.
Sure. Thanks for having me on today, Gary. Well, at Extron, I'm one of the directors of product marketing. And so what that means is the group of products that I look after are things like AV over IP, video distribution systems, signal processors like video walls, scalers, that type of thing, even some of the cables, connectors, architectural connectivity solutions. And so these are really all those components that end up making these esports systems, whether they're in a small practice facility or all the way up to these arena-sized deployments. Those are the opportunities that Extron has in those applications.
Well, it's interesting because as our audience will see, esports is one of those. I can't think of another, honestly, unless you were a company that put in a live venue inside of a fixed operation. It's the only kind of application we have that literally uses every part of our market, because it uses live, it uses rental, it uses permanent installation, it uses traditional AV and AV over IP all at the same time. We'll get back to that in just a second. But Kevin, I want to go back to what we were talking about a minute ago, and that is the driver behind sort of the rise of esports. I think we're sort of at a almost like lightning in a bottle, perfect place, perfect time kind of thing, where the gaming development got to a point where it looks like real life, so it doesn't look fakish. And so you have this sort of like real life kind of feel to it at the same time that we were looking for another sport. And then the pandemic sort of hits all at the same time and sort of gives this rise in interest in esports. And it can be traditional esports like playing football and basketball through esports, but also, Overwatch and some of this, Fortnite and some of the other sort of specialty things. You alluded to the fact that students that play esports sometimes are not the typical athlete or the typical student in other campuses. Can you elaborate on that, whether that's K through 12 or higher education?
Sure. So the two leagues that I work for did surveys across all of their student bodies that asked them, is esports the first after school activity that you've participated in? And more than half, in some cases, I've seen districts report 60%, 70%. It's the first after school activity these students have ever been part of. And what's also interesting is that it's a first time that many of these kids have ever played on a team before. So this is where they're learning teamwork and communication and strategy and perseverance and grit and all of those important soft skills or life skills. They're learning in esports, copy and paste that to team sports, right? There's a significant overlap there. And so these students, are many of them introverted by nature, and they really come out of their shell and they become a valuable part of this team.
So one of the things that some of the data I have read, and as I said, I've been paying attention to the esports market for about 10 years, and I've seen a number of studies that have been done on esports, because you have this sort of dichotomy. You have the parents saying, get out of the basement, go outside and play. And then you have the kid who becomes a superhero online because they're well known in their community as being a big time gamer. And then you have the school all of a sudden offering this as an opportunity. So you have this kid who and in fact, the data has shown, and Bubba Geddard, as you know, has been a big part of our esports foray and our organization. He's talked about this too, that the data is showing that if a school, whether it be a middle school or high school, we don't have any data on elementary, but in middle schools and high school, if a school will offer esports, it provides a sort of rallying community kind of thing that is shared by girls and boys. And it provides another club thing so that they feel they belong to something outside of athletics and outside of academics.
And I want to bring up one more point that a lot of districts are now realizing is that schools and districts get what's called attendance or average daily attendance funding from the government. And so esports will, now that students are involved, now that they're participating in something, now that they're part of a team, they come to school more. They want to come to school. They want to be part of their program. And so schools are seeing that they're bringing in additional attendance-based revenue funding through their esports programs. There's a district that we work with in Southern California that their program, it's 1,800 students, that's generating over $1 million in attendance-based revenue for them every year.
What school district is that, by the way?
That is Moreno Valley Unified School District. If you go to their Twitter page, there's a link to that study. There's some great data that talks about, improvements in GPA, attendance.
So we're going to put that data on the page here.
Right.
So if you scroll down and look, you'll see that report on the page here. Emily, our producer's paying attention, so we'll make sure that data is there on the page. And that's good data to have. And let's, what I'm gonna do. As you've been talking, Kevin, it dawned on me. I've got some pictures here of one of the middle schools that you guys worked on, Davis Middle School.
Yeah.
So I want to start with that, and it's a little out of the ordinary of what I originally had told our producer, but she's hanging in there. And basically, what's interesting here is, and we can just flip through those images really quickly. What's interesting here, one of the things I think you notice is that it's not like you have to find a space and start from scratch. You can use a cafeteria, you can use a classroom, you can use the media center. And I think a lot of cases in middle schools, they end up using a part of the media center where maybe they don't need as many books as they were before because it's all online. But this is a good example of that, isn't it, Kevin?
It is. And in fact, one of the schools that we did a project in, they had a wood shop that was no longer being used. So they converted that into a full cyber innovation center with 2 cybersecurity classrooms and their esports lab as all one new space. And so that's kind of what we saw here at Davis Middle School. This room that I think you're about to see was just a storage room. It's located right behind their.
We'll pop it back up there. We just went through them really quickly, but yeah, pop it back up the overall view. The I think it was the third slide that you showed there, Emily. That one. Go ahead and describe it. It was a storage room.
Yeah, so that was a storage room, but that was behind their cafeteria stage, and they converted it now into their STEM and esports labs. So really what a lot of schools are utilizing these spaces for are dual purpose. So throughout the day, they've got a room now full of these high-powered gaming computers. So now they're able to offer new career technical education classes in things like game design and development or digital photography and video editing and CAD.
Because all of a sudden you've got a computer that has all this VRAM on it that they didn't need before,
Absolutely.
but all of a sudden need for esports.
So what's interesting is back when we went to that one-to-one Chromebook or one-to-one tablet,
Yep.
that eliminated a lot of those types of teaching opportunities. Now those are coming back. And there's an interesting article I saw recently by the National Federation of High School Associations that talked about the reincarnation of computer labs. And that's what we're seeing through this in esports.
Yeah, and I think what you're alluding to there is for esports games, we can't use typical laptops. There are some companies, Lenovo has built a laptop that you can use for many of the games, but we want this real time, no delay connectivity, and we're using a desktop kind of workstation kind of applications. And because we're putting those in, you're saying that same technology is now capable of doing the STEM projects that they didn't have the capability of doing when they were just using Chromebooks.
And then when we have the conversation about funding, there's Perkins grant funding around career technical education. So schools are tapping into that to get these high-powered computers. Now they can offer esports after school. So that's another way that they can go about acquiring these spaces.
Well, this is great. I mean, so I think first message you should have gotten from this so far is obviously the market potential is huge. Second is, as an AV professional, you have to start by helping coach the school on not just how to do it, Andrew, which we're going to get to, Andrew, in just a second, but how to fund it and why they should do it. So that study that we're referring to, that's on the page below, is part of that. But Kevin, obviously the schools, they're looking. Kevin made a really good point. They're looking for a reason to keep kids in school for two reasons. Number one is the financial gain, but number two, the teachers don't like to have to deal with students that are constantly missing class. Once we've convinced them that they build an esports arena, or a venue, I should say, in let's talk K through 12, because let's be honest, they don't have the money that higher education or corporations have. How do you provide design services, or do you provide prefab design concepts for esports, or sort of where do we start, Andrew?
So for that, we've got people like Kevin and some others on the team that really have a focus on the esports applications. And that team has support for doing design work. And so if somebody has an idea of a space that they wanted to upfit for esports, we've got some examples, various system diagrams that are kind of canned approaches for anything from a practice space, all the way up through an arena. We've also got some online resources available at extron.com. And there's even a design guide that walks you through a lot of the technology that goes into esports, and then does hit onto some of those applications in the various sizes.
We're flipping through some of the drawings that you have available now. And in fact, on our page, you can hit that link if you want to have a copy of that design guide. We didn't include the design guide. You got to register for the design guide. So if you click on it, you can go register real quick. You can get the design guide directly from Extron. So basically, as an integrator, you're even doing the design for them to sort of accelerate the process, because that's something that would normally cost a lot of money and time. So you've sort of accelerated that process somewhat. Do you have like a good, better, best option, Andrew, or is it case by case?
It really comes down to the application. So I'm going to say it depends, right? And if you've got a smaller space, certainly you would have a different budget than you would if you're doing the arena. When you start to look at a larger facility, you're going to have some decisions to make. You might want to go with an XTP-based system because you're doing a lot of high performance HDMI switching. But when you start adding in those, when you start adding in those applications like streaming and AV over IP, maybe you want to have that feed that does go to Twitch. These are all kind of these little add-on elements that you can add into that system. And the design guide does a good job of showing you those things. But if you've got something that's really one-off, we've got a whole team that's there to back people up on that.
Well, you just gave me a good segue back into my presentation a little bit, because you just mentioned something I was about to talk about. So if we can pop there you go, back up there, because what Andrew just said is really important. And beautiful, Emily. What Andrew said is really important, because esports is not one system. It's multiple systems in one. Like, for example, how you stream it is not how you show it live, and certainly not how you show it to players. And so what you ultimately have is, regardless of the venue, let's forget if it's a arena or if it's just a classroom that you're putting on a tournament in. And by the way, you might think, well, we're not going to have big tournaments here. We don't have to worry about that. You do, because even if it's just the kids in the tournament and no one's watching, you still have all this, because someone's going to want to watch, whether it's the professors or the other members of the club. So you're going to have to build a system that does more than just allow players to play at their workstations. So basically what you have with esports is you have 4 systems in one. I broke, and maybe Kevin will beat me up for this, or maybe Andrew, you'll beat me up for this. I broke it down into 4 systems because maybe you think I've oversimplified it here. But I look at the systems as being 4 parts. There's what we give the gamers, what we give the live spectators, what we give the observers or referees, whatever you want to call them, and what we send the streaming audience, because those are different things. And I'll talk about each one of those individually, because the gamers cannot have any delay. So whether or not you're plugging straight in from the computer to the monitor, A lot of cases, we're not doing that. A lot of cases, we are still going through some type of AV over IP system or some type of processing because it's better to matrix everything and to have full control over it from a management standpoint. But if we're using AV over IP, we're going to go probably ST2110 or something with zero latency for the gamers, or we're going to connect directly to the displays themselves. All right, so then we have the live spectators. And this is the part I think a lot of people that are not involved, and I certainly didn't know until I got involved in esports, is that the live spectators are seeing a delay of the actual live content that the players are playing. And that delay is determined by the game platform in many cases. So Overwatch has a specific formula. When you're watching an Overwatch tournament, the live audience is not seeing, sometimes they're not seeing the action live. And the reason for that, Andrew, is because the players themselves can get tipped off by the audience. So they actually delay the feed, but they have to give a high quality feed because they're sending it to large screen LEDs, as you mentioned, Andrew. Small LCDs that might be there, projection. You could be using ribbon displays. There's all sorts of different formats. So we're bringing it into, whether it be a virtual matrix or an actual matrix, which we're bringing it into something so we have the ability to send anything anywhere we want it to go. So if we're going AV over IP there, Andrew, you could do 1 gig to 10 gig, but you got to have the ability to do both, because I feel like once you get it big enough, you're going to want to have as little compression as possible. But do you agree with that for the live spectators?
Yeah, certainly when you start putting these 4K high frame rate signals or whatever resolution the gamers are using for their gameplay onto a DV LED wall that's 20, 30, 40 feet wide, I mean, that's a lot of canvas that you're having to fill up, and you really want to minimize your compression ratios. And that's why we see things like the Pure 3 codec from NAV, and you're not going down to like a H.264 type stream for those kinds of applications. When you start doing those codecs, you lose just too much of the image quality.
So we're gonna come back and talk about Pure 3 in a second, but I'm gonna make sure that everyone knows what you're kind of referring to there. But again, I'm going to dumb it down, so I apologize if you want to correct me. Go right ahead. In the Extron Nav system, one of the unique features that you have is the ability to dial in basically whether the bandwidth that you want. So for example, you could spec the Nav and decide to send 10 gig to the 4K native 4K displays, but then send 1 gig to all the side displays that are maybe supporting maybe POV cameras for the players. Is that what you're referring to with regard to Pure 3?
Yep, exactly, Gary. So a lot of times when you have these arenas, you mentioned ribbon displays, the main stage display. Maybe you've got some peripheral displays in a concourse somewhere else within that facility, and you want to do all of your matrix routing, your AV over IP routing for that main arena. You want to do that on a 10 gig backbone, but you might not have that 10 gig backbone available to the concourse or the snack bar, where people still want to be engaged with what's happening on stage. And that's where being able to adjust that bit rate down to a 1 gig rate while still supporting 10 gig within the arena really becomes an asset to the system design. And that's one of the things that's really unique about the Pure 3 codec, is that ability to have that kind of control over your bit rates and to be able to have that interoperability.
Yeah, and we're showing, for example, right now we're showing an esports arena that is, I'd say, probably kind of average on a college campus. It's at the University of Hawaii, or Hawaii Pacific University, I should say. And it's kind of typical in the sense that it's not big, but it's not small. It's sort of in that middle where you have a bunch of players, but you also have a fairly large audience there. And in that case, we're going to put different resolution content in different places, and therefore we can use different bandwidth outputs of the NAV3. The nice thing about the NAV, I should say, the nice thing about that is we're not having to make the decision up front as to the bandwidth we use. We can make the decision on the back end and also adjust it as we go through there. It's a good point. All right, so let's go back to my presentation here, because we've only talked about 2 of the systems, which is the live. And I think a lot of what's interesting, I went to an esports tournament, surprised me, because what was weird about it was, and it didn't dawn on me until after I actually watched it. I watched it and I wasn't sure what I was seeing, and then afterwards somebody said, "Oh, well, this is what happened." The players, they're playing. You're watching, and if you look carefully, the players will stop playing, but you're still seeing them playing. And you're like, what's going on here? It's because the feed is delayed to the live audience, the players stop and they can't celebrate until after the audience knows who won, because they don't want to tip off who actually won at the end of a tournament. So it's kind of odd to watch because of that delay, but you're still getting the high quality signal around the arena. The observer slash refs, they don't need the same real time feed or no latency feed as the players, but they have to be able to see all the details. So they still have to have the full frame rate as the players, but it can have some latency. And obviously, they're going to want to go back and do reviews. Literally like you watch on let's go roll the tape and let's go look at let's watch what happened. The same kind of thing happens in esports as well. And then finally, we have the online audience that's watching it on Twitch or wherever they might be watching it. And in that case, Kevin, Andrew, you tell me if I'm right or wrong here, but we're pretty much going out H.264 using like an S&P or something like that, or any kind of streaming box that's compatible with Twitch and YouTube and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Gary. You really need to get those 10 gig or even 1 gig data rates down to something that's more manageable for internet-based streaming. Even if you're using a content delivery network like Twitch or YouTube, they're looking for something under a gig coming in for them to redistribute to all their viewers. And so that's where something like you mentioned, Gary, the SMP and SME, one of these products that really just becomes another output of your AV over IP matrix system, is then being transcoded into a format that works for those online viewers to see.
Okay. Yeah. And so that's why you have those 4 systems in one, because you have this sort of live event going on, but you're having to produce it for the live audience separately from the audience watching at home. Now, that also can mean, and I'll show you here in a little bit, that also can mean that the broadcasters there may actually be 2 different broadcasting audiences. There's the live, just like a football game, really. If you think about it, if you're going to a live football game, you have the announcer in the stadium, and then you have the ESPN announcers that are announcing in the booth sitting at home, right? It's very similar to that. You have these live announcers that are there who know the players and are interviewing players and coaches in real time, and you're seeing a broadcast booth on the floor as well. But then you also have the at-home audience, and they're not seeing that because the downtime. The issue is, Kevin, if we're doing a produced tournament, we're not just going to show the at-home viewers the interviews that are there live, because the time between getting one person from one interview to the next, there's a lot of downtime. People will just stop watching if the tournament's not going on at that time. So we have more of a produced thing where the audience at home is watching watching a commentator who's providing color commentary to what they're watching, but also interspersed with pre-recorded interviews and content, right?
Yes, absolutely right. Yep.
And so that's why you have these multiple systems in one kind of going there. And so if you're an AV integrator, this is like the holy grail, right? Because you get to activate every part of your company. And we haven't even talked about management and remote management and servicing and all the other parts come with it. And by the way, at my last count, there were 8 schools that are currently building esports arenas on campus. 8 meaning they're not giants, not like they're 20,000 seat arenas, but they're building anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 seat arenas on campus from either old venues that they're not using anymore, or building them from scratch, where they're actually building an esports venue. You look at a school like Ohio State that has 55,000 students, they're going to have their own separate esports arena, is a good example of that. Florida, Texas, the bigger schools like that will eventually go that way. UC Irvine, I think, was the first university that I knew of. I don't know, Kevin or Andrew, which one of you might know the answer to this, but the first I personally knew of on campus was UC Irvine. Kevin, you're shaking your head. Is that right?
Yeah, UC Irvine was one of the first. University of Utah was an early adopter as well. Robert Morris University. There were a few that were kind of the early pioneers of esports, and it quickly grew after that. But I'll tell you, we're seeing a lot of districts. We just had a big project in Bartow County, Georgia, who converted an auditorium into a purpose-built esports venue. So it's got a 5v5 tournament stage with two large 90-inch displays mounted on the back wall, a big video wall in front, a full-scale sound production system, and it is incredible. And it's
What
all
school is this
connected.
again?
This is Bartow County Public Schools in Georgia. And we're seeing more and more of these facilities that are opening up. And the idea, again, is going back to what we talked about with tying in career technical education. So students will run these live events. They'll handle every bit of the production. So you'll have a student who's handling the shoutcasting, the live streaming, everything that's happening. It's all student led, and that's how they're getting that real world experience. There's others that are out there developing these similar types of arenas.
Yeah, we're showing Wake Tech University, which is here. Wake Tech is here in North Carolina, and we're showing what they've done with their esports team. They actually have a shoutcaster booth that we just flipped through there, and so yeah, they're other students and other friends of the students, and then other schools are actually watching them play these tournaments as they're playing them. We're going to pop up Point Park University's esports as well. I think they have a pretty impressive facility as well as soon as we get done with Wake Tech. And I think it's important for people to see these venues because the interesting thing is in some cases they look just like classrooms that have been modified to be esports venues like what you're seeing on the screen now. But in other cases, they're larger venues that they've actually grown the program and actually continue to expand where they started in one small place and grew. And then as a university just takes that from a club team to an athletic, team where they actually recognize it by the athletic department, you're going to see, you'll then see them actually make an investment in the infrastructure. And, in some cases they're sharing it with other sports, like maybe gymnastics and wrestling and esports are in one arena like they are in University of Minnesota, or you have separate facilities that are being built for the esports team as it grows. And of course, two things are going to really drive that over the course of the next 4 years. The fact that the Olympic Committee has made esports an Olympic team sports program, which means it'll be in the and by the way, it'll be in LA in 2028. So that's going to make it popular in North America. And by the way, I'll come back to this because the other thing is NCAA, which I already mentioned. Esports in Europe is not as big of a deal as it is in North America because European colleges and universities don't have teams. Sports become popular through club sports. And so esports in Europe is being developed a totally different way. And in fact, Bubba Getter, who does our live esports show, which comes on twice a month at Rave Pubs, if you want to watch past episodes of Bubba Getter, we're going to show a clip in just a minute. But if we watch past episodes of his show, you can actually go to ravepubs.com and then click on the Rave TV link and at the top, and you can see the esports show. We're on second season. Thank you to Extron for sponsoring that as well. Obviously, you're taking esports very seriously. But he is actually, the reason I mentioned is he's actually in the UK because in the UK they have a university that's actually teaching the first semester long esports program. So we're going to see a growth in esports in Europe, probably mimicking what we have here, but it'll be done through club sports, much like swimming and gymnastics has grown internationally, soccer as well. I mean, we could only hope it'd be like soccer one day, but I don't think that's going to happen in our lifetime, I don't think. But so I want to, we obviously, this is a 2-day event. I want to take you, we're going to, Andrew and Kevin are going to be back on, let's see, what's today? Today's Monday, or Tuesday. So Andrew and Kevin are going to be back on Thursday when we do part 2 to this. But what I want to do is take you out, before we take you out with this clip, I'm going to actually show you some pictures of West Point's esports venue that Extron did. You did a case study on this just recently that was great. We highlighted it in an episode of our esports show earlier this year. And it's a great example. And the reason why I want to show it is because here's a national champion team, right? This is a team that's winning national championships in esports, and showing you some pictures of that. You can see both the production side and the audience viewing galleries coming up here in a second while you can actually see the students playing. You can see there's your digital canvas, basically, Andrew, where you can put up content anywhere, and you have entertaining content as well as the sports venue content. You can see you have a virtual production stage ultimately there that you're building. So it's a full live event stage as well. And of course, it's all being controlled by one control system, Extron. But we're gonna go out of part one right now, and we want you to come back for part two on Thursday. If you don't have time to watch it live, you don't get the CTS credits if you don't watch it live. But if you don't have time to watch it live, you go below and you'll on Thursday come back to this page and you'll be able to see part two archived here along with part one. But I want to show this couple-minute clip of that West Point venue because there's a walkthrough of that kind of gives you a good feel for what it takes to build an esports venue. So thank you for watching part one. We're going to come back to part two on Thursday, same time, same place. Let's take it out with this piece from Bubba Getter. And Emily, we do have the audio with this, right? I don't have to talk over this. Or is the audio? Okay, good. Yep, so good. We're going to watch this. We're going to go out with this piece here.
One of these control panels, these are 10-inch touchscreen control panels, allow for anywhere that we're in the room to control the full capability of the Extron space.
Wow. Wow.
Isn't that insane?
Okay, oh, so this is the behind the scene. This is back.
And there's another one.
So what do we got
vertical.
here?
The same thing, another 10-inch control panel. So if I find myself at the vertical rack, I can control this from this space as well.
So okay, Kevin, Andrew, what did I just see? What was that thing? Let's let the Extron experts here tell me in maybe some layman's terms as well.
The 10-inch touch panel there?
Yeah.
So that would be the user interface. There's a control processor here in the system that handles all the automation and communication back to each of the pieces of equipment, the matrix switchers, the DSP processors, the amplifiers, the streaming media processors. And so to streamline that operation, we give them a single pane of glass interface that lets them get hands-on with all of that equipment. And as Victor was saying, the cadets are able to come in there and they can take control over that system and really be the producers of it without having to really understand all of the exact in and outs, because we simplify that for them on that touch panel.
So that's
and there's also pages.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Sorry, but yeah, there's also pages, one for lighting control, one for video routing, one for the multi-graphic processor, one for camera control. So easily flipping between those different pages and you have full control over that. So all the video distribution, what sources you want where, and then selecting what input sources you want within that multi-window processor. So not only can you change the layouts through the different presets, you say what you want in those different sources.